Right.
We're recording. Hello.
Okay. Hello, everybody.
This is Michael, and he's going to talk to us about this painting, Don't Tread on Me, and I'm going to ask him a couple of questions about process.
Okay. Hopefully, Margaret will ask me lots of questions because I
I'll try.
won't be able to remember everything. So with this painting, like maybe some of the others that you saw, it's kind of all one color, or pretty much all one color. But so I started with a drawing that I projected onto this white panel and then tweaked a little bit and erased stuff and got it where I wanted it. So I'm going to talk about what it's like to go to the panel that has the drawing on it and begin painting in oils on that panel to make this painting. Unlike a lot of other paintings in a really traditional way of painting, I don't do underpaintings on these. I sort of paint them in what's always been prohibited as a window shade approach. Like I start in one area, like the upper left, maybe up here, and then work my way down. And I've got my photo reference either right behind the canvas or maybe even attached to the canvas or in my hand while I'm beginning this.
So it's in your line of sight?
It's in my line of sight or very close by. If I'm holding it in my hand, maybe it'll be on taped to a foam core board that I can pick up and put down as I need to. So as I come into the studio that morning, I usually begin, it gives me sort of a grounding to mix a string of neutrals on my palette. And my neutral combination has always been burnt sienna, an earth orange, and French ultramarine, which is sort of an earth blue. I mix the two of them and a dab of white to give it some opacity to basically a black. And then I add white in little piles, maybe 6 or 7, depending on how much neutral is going to be in the painting. And this one I probably made 5. A black, a dark gray, a medium gray, a light gray, and then white. Maybe the white has a dab of Naples yellow or something to warm it up.
Will you do that for us?
Yeah, do you want to?
I will, but when you say black, do you mean ultramarine blue and burnt sienna?
Right, mixed to a combination. And the way to find out that you've got the right combination of blue to burnt sienna is to add some white off to the side and make sure it's not like sort of tilting orange or blue. So you'll do that to sort of test that black pile. And then when you get that nice and neutral, then you sort of add white off to the right. I'll show you now because that'll be easier. Sorry to interrupt, but then I'll have, in the case of something where I know I'm going to need a lot of greens, I'll mix a string of greens. I'll have a few other my normal palette of 10 or 11 colors up in an arc, like a rainbow up at the top. But I'll have my neutral string along the bottom and maybe the green string in this case, or an orange string if I was doing a life jacket in the middle. And I'm going to just quickly show you one other painting, if I can.
Sometimes it does that. Let's see if we do Control Command F.
All right, well, we'll wait on that. Maybe we'll just go to mix the string. I'm going to show you a painting that has a lot of neutrals in it, but I could show you that one had a bluish greenish string for the wave. It's a painting, a seascape kind of.
If you want to sort of open up some tubes,
I'll get my.
Or I could do that too. I swiped.
Okay.
So we might run into an issue later, but I just swiped left. So here we are.
Let's do that. Can we show them the type real quick?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So in this case, the sky is made up of all neutrals. So I have my neutral string, which I'll mix up and show you. And because it's neutral, I can sort of push it in one direction or the other temperature-wise. So to make the sky, that's funny. All right, I don't know what happened there, but.
Oh, and it worked.
Yeah, but I don't know why it's so tiny.
Because it's, if we do this,
okay.
that'll.
So if the sky might have a little bit of blue in certain places. It might have a little bit of yellow. It might have pink, and I can just add that to the piles. So I will switch to here and show you how I mix my neutral string.
I'm gonna make this nice and oopsie, wrong thing. I'm gonna make the palette a little larger on our screen so you can really see it.
Okay, and I can tell you from experience that mixing burnt sienna and French ultramarine, I'm going to need more blue than sienna, just because I know that.
There's a little lag, so hearing your voice, but we're not seeing any action yet.
Okay.
A lot of the students are familiar with it. I think we'll see it. Yeah, we should. I don't think so, because the longer you wait, yeah, so just keep going and hopefully it'll catch up.
Like I said, I'll get a dab of white to kind of test this. Mix.
Oh, darn. Okay, will you hold that? And I'm just going to wake up the screen share again. It is, because I think if I stop recording, then I'm really in trouble. MacBook Pro 2894. Okay, now we have this on the camera. It's back, and you can see his pile of, it does look black for all the world.
Okay, so I've just mixed my French ultramarine. Do you think it recorded that, or probably not? No, okay. So now I'm going to add just a teeny bit of white, just to take a little bit of it and mix it. And I can tell it looks pretty neutral. It might even be a little bit on the cool side, but that is neutral enough for me. Because like I said, you can sort of push it in either direction by adding a warm color like the orange, or push it to blue, or whatever direction you want. So I'm satisfied that this black, this mixture of French ultramarine and burnt sienna, is a neutral mixture. I'm just going to add that gray right into the pile.
What it's doing, but I think we can see. Yeah, it's doing something over there, but I think that's all right. I'm not sure why the word original is there. Like I touched it, and it's, I don't want it to. No, okay. So, but I think that we can live with that. That word on.
So I will wipe my palette knife clean, and I'm sort of pretty fastidious when I'm doing these strings, so I wipe up extra, and I will bring, I'm not going to need much dark black, so I can bring a lot of it over here and add some white. Mix that up. So I'll only do 5 for this. I think 5 is probably plenty for anyone. You could mix 7, you could mix 8 or 10. You get as granular as you want. And as I get down to the white end, I might mix a few sort of light grays, because it's hard to say why I do that, but a little goes a long way. A little bit of gray transforms the color a lot. So
Do you feel like there's more variety within the lighter end of the spectrum than there is in the darker end?
only if that's the way you want your painting to look. So ideally, this would be sort of the middle color.
Yeah.
But you're right. I mean, generally, you don't need that. That's like I was saying with the black. You don't need a whole lot of black. The hose, certainly, there's almost none. Just where the sort of cracks are between the two.
This is so great to just see the careful way that you're mixing these up.
Yeah, and so when I come into the studio that morning, I would probably lay out my palette, which would take maybe a half an hour or 20 minutes, and then go take a break or do something. I find that to be a little bit of a chore.
And when you say lay out your palette, you mean this mixing?
Mixing strings, getting all the colors where they would be. So maybe I'll show you, speaking of that, just laying out the rest of it. So say I've got my string here. You can
This
kind
is
of see
called
the
a
white.
string. So from the dark to the white.
And I would
Value string.
do the same with the green, say. But for now, I'm going to also lay out the actual palette with all the colors I might use for the painting and have them in little piles along the top.
Now we can see all the way to the left of the palette. So
Yeah.
that was all the raw umber and
Raw umber, which is just a dark brown, kind of on the
Cool.
greenish side. I don't really know. It's not orange either way, burnt sienna or raw or burnt umber. Then the next was I have French ultramarine on the palette. This is a color called cobalt teal. It could be any sort of prismatic blue or blue-green, depending on what you're painting.
could it be
For
a
the
phthalo?
ocean, could be phthalo. I don't use phthalo much, but if I were painting like the water jug or something like this mouse, I would use phthalo because it's a very intense blue.
Like that.
Right, and I call it candy-colored blue.
Mm-hmm.
For the tide pool painting, I use this cobalt teal.
Painting again.
And I'm going to put a phthalo green because we're sort of pretending we're doing the hose. Phthalo green, which is again kind of candy colored, like as intense chemical green as you can get, and a permanent green. So it'll be like one prismatic or synthetic color and one earth color. I'm thinking of the permanent green light in this case as being earthy. Like they don't overwhelm. They don't have great tinting power the way a phthalo does. If you mix a tiny dab of phthalo in with your white, you'll get a lot of bang for your buck. This is just a red. This one happens to be Paroline red. So even if I were doing the hose, I would probably have some of these. Oops. Probably have some of these on the palette just to free myself up to dab here and there to adjust colors. Next, I will have the burnt sienna that I use to mix my neutral. So that's a sort of an orange, very earthy orange. I had a Windsor orange, which is sort of chemically, but I switched instead to cadmium orange. So the oranges I have here are both kind of earthy, but still bright. And cadmium yellow light, that would come in handy with the hose to mix the sort of lighter end of the green. And I have yellow ochre, although for the hose I probably wouldn't do it, so I'm not going to use that. But I would, for say the tide pool painting, I would want to be able to tint my white almost any time. I like to sort of tint the white to a warmth.
You said sometimes you use Naples?
Yeah, Naples yellow. This my palette knife has a little bit of the Paroline red still on it. But that's fine because, I mean, I'll wipe it off now, but I'm going to wipe my hands. Thank you. When you compare this, you can't see it because there's a reflection of a light. But anyway, I'll pick it up and put it next to the gray. Even though this has a lot of warmth to it, it basically looks white.
What if I go like that? Oh, no, it's not catching up. And it didn't get it. But.
So I will almost always tint my whites to the warmth. There's rarely going to be a white that's cool. You might do it in the middle of a highlight that you've already established with some warm white. If you really want that highlight to pop, you might put some cold white. I think that's a little bit too tricksy. I would never really do that. But so here's the way the palette might look when I come back from having a coffee or something like that.
Just want to make sure we're recording. I'm still like Stop recording, pause, record. Okay, just checking. I wanted to, because I got nervous thinking, what if it's not recording? Okay, so you go take a coffee break.
And these piles would probably be quite a bit bigger for a painting. I don't like to run out and have to remix them, but still tiny compared to a lot of painters. I certainly am economical with the paint and kind of fastidious, as I said. So if I were doing the hose now, I would come in and mix a string of green, which say I start with the phthalo and the permanent green light. I would mix them together. Even though I have them on my palette, I would mix a pile of those.
So if you were painting those, you'd leave them up here.
I'd leave them
and
up
also,
there, but I'm mixing a new string. So I want to make this a pretty bright. I want to see what the sort of middle is, because phthalo isn't going to be my darkest green. What I'll do is take some of that and maybe add some grays to it. Phthalo would be transparent and too bright, but if I want a shadow of the hose, I'm going to want something that's somewhat opaque and just dark, not just phthalo green out of the tube.
it dropped the screen share. Here we go, screen share. At least it appears to have dropped, but it's back. There we go.
So I've got the phthalo here.
Oh, I know why it's dropping it. Because my phone isn't on, like, I usually put it on night shift, do not disturb, and I think it drops it every time I get some kind of message.
So I've got I've got the phthalo pure here, which I also have up here, so I might just move the rest of this up. And maybe I would, if these piles were bigger and I wanted to, I might mix with the palette knife some of this and this here. But for today, I'm just going to take this and some more permanent green, add a little bit of the cadmium yellow. So this string, I'm really only going to have like 4 things.
Bigger, you just keep going.
And I'll do it again with maybe more cadmium yellow and a little bit of the light gray or the white, just so that I have a few different values of green going into the painting. And I use a lot of medium, especially with these panel paintings, because I sometimes wipe away a mistake, or generally I like the paint to be pretty well. So there would be my palette, and I might start, I don't know where on the painting I would start with this, but again, since you're working in that window shade, like sort of top to bottom, maybe I would start near the upper left.
Do you want to see the painting again?
Sure.
So I'm going to go here. Whoops, wrong one. There you go. I'm going to close that. And there it is. And might take us away to this.
Okay, so I might start here. And I'm trying to remember, it's been a long time since I painted like this. Like now, with the tide pool is a recent painting, so I would do a sort of limited palette. Should we switch to the tide pool for a minute?
I think I can just do this.
Yeah, I would make this painting in sort of burnt sienna. I would do just a single color grisaille, I guess. So just an underpainting in burnt sienna, yellow ochre, and raw umber, maybe with a little bit of white. So that would be there, dry. I would do a sort of a pale version of this to kind of get some of the modeling in with those colors plus the blues and more white. But then I would come in for the last session or the third or fourth session and really mix big piles and have the underpainting here. But for the hose or these paintings with the white background, the life jacket, the hose, I don't have any underpainting. I just start, and it's basically almost like paint by number in that the colors are kind of next to each other. they're not over anything. I blend certainly in places like where you see there's sort of the main green color. There's a darker as it gets down here. There's a reflected color here. So I'll blend those with a clean, dry brush, soft brush. But basically, I'm painting almost like a paint by numbers. Like, I know there's a reflection up here because I drew it. This over here, it's the shadow side. So the light is coming from over my right shoulder. These are the highlights. That is the sun. I'm photographing this on my back porch. So ordinarily there would be a dark, you would think almost like this, over on the side away from the sun. But this is my white house door reflected in the shiny, shiny hose. So that's why this isn't a dark, dark shadow. But so I paint my green, and I'm gonna zoom in a little bit. So I guess it's hard to describe, but I know what I want to do as far as making these, and I'm looking very closely at the photograph to see like, okay, this is a much more neutral green. Each link of the hose has a different sort of reflective situation. You can really see here, this is the sun in the sky. Like what you're seeing all around here is the blue sky. Hard to say why that happens, I think because this is a reflection from the porch, the cement porch. So there's a transition of the darkest part of the hose, and then there's a reflection of the surface that the hose was sitting on, which is all this stuff. So the darkest, what we used to call the turning at the academy, was is here in the middle. Doesn't show up. There's no reflection of the porch here because this sort of link of the hose is inside. It's reflecting this area. So this doesn't have this white business down here.
These are hanging over and kind of.
Yeah, they're reflecting. And this one is even reflecting this. So this little dash of green right here is this part of the hose going off the porch.
And that one too?
Yes, that one too. So I think that's pretty much it. Yes.
My question is, you mixed up this string. What about, do you mix up different strings for different parts of the green, like the turquoisey? Would you have mixed up a string for that too? Like there's so many different greens here.
So no, I wouldn't. That's why I have all of the other colors.
Do you want to go back?
No, that's fine. I think so. I would be painting it. The string is helpful. Yeah, can we go back to the hose?
Mm-hmm.
Just because I find without having a string, I won't get these separations of blue. So I could, if I really, and it's possible that I did mix up a string of reflection color, say. I don't think so. I think I would take my neutrals and mix them with a dab of green.
What are your neutrals? When you say these?
The neutral string that's along the bottom are my neutrals. So I would add like a bunch of this and a bunch of this, and maybe there would be a pile here of the two of these mixed. And if we could go back to the hose. So I would know that I have a neutral green. I would paint it, maybe paint it here and here, and then I would sort of go in with the brush and add some whites up here, or add, I would mix that with the brush on the palette. But something like this, I would really want to keep clean and separate.
You mean a little bit of green there, not the neutral?
Yeah. The neutral is here. There's another neutral out here.
I have another question
Yes.
that often I get asked, and that is, I think you already answered this. You said, but do you start with darks? Is there a place you start? Would you start with the darks and go all through with your dark line?
No, like I said, I paint it from top to bottom. I might sort of, if I know I've got a lot of this, sort of the middle color, say the local color, what the hose looks like if I just bring it into a sort of evenly lit room. This green, I might put a bunch of it here just to sort of, because I've got it on my brush. If I know it's going to be maybe just along there, or, I might paint a few areas of the top.
Would you have gone all the way
Probably not, because like I said, I almost always I want to finish, before I start putting too much of it down, I want to make sure it works with these transitions. So I would probably add, I'd paint this little kink maybe, and then do some of the darks down here, and then do some of the lights just to make sure, like, okay, this really does look like a hose, or like what I want it to look like. And then do the next one down and sort of get these shadows. I want to establish that it's going to work, basically.
Like turn in space, sort of. And
yeah.
another question, when you're working, like what I notice is the wide variety of greens, and that here it looks very warm, like it's a warmer dark green, as opposed to even there it looks cooler. Are you thinking, what could you be thinking on your palette from these different warmer, cooler?
I don't really, I get the information probably from the photograph.
Can we go to your palette and say, oopsie, it dropped it. So on the palette, would you be adding some of your burnt umber or yellow or orange to that? To
probably,
get the
or it
green?
would be already mixed up. But you're right. I would tweak it. Like if it wasn't working, like if I saw that it just looked too cool and not, it was more flat, like I would add some of maybe an orange or a burnt sienna or something. I can't really show you on the palette, but yeah.
Sorry. Click there, we can find and then double click that.
Okay.
Cool.
So you were asking,
you know what I mean?
these.
How that looks like it's got a little more brown or ochre or something than.
Yeah, so I probably would have started though with something that's just darker than that, and then I would from the palette just pick up some green with a little bit of that warmth in it and just paint it right on there. But then I would also want to get what's next to it and make sure that I can blend here so that they're not just two colors sort of laying next to each other, so I can soften it. Or if it was up here, I'd want to drag a little bit of this dark color in next to it to just, I don't want to leave them separate.
That makes sense. And so there's all of the colors are kind of in the all the colors from your paint tubes, or a lot of them are mixed in to the colors that show up in the
there might not be the red, but if I was painting in here with a dark neutral green and it wasn't dark enough, maybe I would add a few dabs of red. Not here, I wouldn't add them, but I would add them to the color on the palette and put it in here and see if that makes that shadow sit deep.
Can we see that?
Back.
Like, oh, I do. You like a filbert? Okay.
Do you have anything?
Oh, I do have a little medium. Okay. A little oil.
So if it was a sort of dark green that I put on there for that deep shadow that we just talked about. Maybe it even has some neutral here from the black pile. And I put it on, but I didn't think it was sitting deeply enough in there.
I just kind of try to zoom in a little bit on where you're mixing.
So I'm almost making like a cave back there. I might add this raw umber, or I might add the French ultramarine, but really what might, so I put them on and see if it was sitting back enough. But then I might say, oh, you know what will really work will be some of this red, and I'll mix that in. You can see that change happen right on the palette. Or maybe
yeah.
Lighting, but it went from a green that was kind of doing one thing. I'll mix it again.
Well, that's better. Yeah, I can see the red and the green now,
So
or the neutrality.
But say I even did this, and I said, well, it's almost good enough, but I'm going to try it again. You can see that green really turning into a dark. You could even mix, if it was a green hose, you could mix your neutral string with green and red. It doesn't have to be ultramarine and or sienna. It's two complementary colors. But so I'm even going to add more red and see what happens then. You could almost go to where this color is more red than green. And if we go back to the hose painting just quick. So up here is the kind of thing I'm talking about, or maybe in here.
Yeah.
You know, something where you would have a color there, but you're pulling from the palette to get the value and the temperature that you want that works in the paint.
I just thought of another question.
Okay.
At the beginning, you talked about the white with a little bit of of yellow, so for a warm white. And in the painting, do we see that? Do we see white with yellow anywhere in the painting?
It's hard for me to tell, but I would say the highlights, this might be an example of where I made it cool because the majority of the local color is warm green. I might have put the white down. It's hard for me to say. I think it probably would have had yellow in it because yellow would work. I think maybe there's a little bit of a coolness around. I mean, it basically turns into nothing. But
And maybe
I mean, certainly I can, if we go to the Tide Pool painting, I can show you where. So I would be doing my lights, but I'd be holding back. I'd be using like a white with some gray in it throughout all of the underpainting. And then in a last pass, any of these really bright whites would be a white with a teeny bit of yellow. I wouldn't use pure white right out of the tube because it just doesn't sort of sing. But the whole time I've been painting this, I've been sort of keeping the values lower or darker so that because I know that there's a lot of shiny reflections and things that are going to need that last little punch of white with a little bit of yellow in it. So,
I really see it, I think, when I...
Yeah,
I
over here there's a lot.
Yeah, I feel like from that corner, I don't know how it looks from every perspective, but I can see...
Here, yeah, it does look like that. Certainly straight on, it's not as clear, but...
So move around your computer screens if you're watching, and maybe you can see the difference of yellow and gray.
So the neutral string would be almost the entire sky. A lot of this, for this painting, I probably did mix a blue, turquoise, green string, or at least those 3 or 4 values of color.
I have sort of a question, or just pointing out, these lights here, even though they look light to us and reflective, if we could like sample it and compare it, would they be dimmer, do you think?
Much darker, yeah, because it's...
So it looks bright, but it is not the same high value.
With all of the other stuff that's dark. But yeah, I would have held back like the breaking waves, this sort of white water would have maybe been that dark at another layer, but then I make it a little bit whiter until that last detail when I really add them. Yeah, you can see up there, there's a good, it's not only darker, but it's warm maybe, or cool.
Umbery.
But then up here, let's go back to that. I saw there was a really heavy impasto there. Of the white, you can see the reflection of the paint brush stroke.
You can even see the transition from it gets softer, sort of blending.
Right.
And even like within this one little chunk right there, it's got a thick bit and it sort of blends away.
Mm-hmm. Kind of want more there. So that's basically it. I mean, this is a different approach to making a painting. This is oil on canvas, like I said, with a warm underpainting. You can even see some of the warmth probably coming through in places in
yeah.
the sky.
It might sort of take your eyes a while to adjust, but you know, it's warmer, say there. One last question. Do I have any brushes down here that you use?
It's mostly filberts and rounds, certainly for something like this.
Sorry, like, would it be, because we use really different brushes, as you guys might know.
Well, no, like I definitely, this is one of my most commonly used brushes. It's a filbert. This says number 4. It's about maybe the width of your pinky finger. There's a smaller filbert.
Do you use synthetic brushes?
Rounds. I use mostly synthetic, but I do have some natural bristle brushes. Sable. The hog's hair I don't use very often because they're very stiff. I like them for certain effects, and you certainly if you're scumbling, you're adding a sort of dragging a dry pigment across, like you might use a hog's bristle brush with a lot of dry white paint in a wave top breaking.
Do you use different ones for MDF, or if not MDF, so you do different ones for different surfaces, like canvas?
Maybe. It depends on the effect that you want. I mean, I would never use the hog's bristle on a smooth panel because it would pull paint off of that surface rather than adding it on. So, yeah, I would. If it was a coarse canvas, you might be able to use the hog's bristle brushes.
Just thought is there any painting you want to wrap up with, or?
Yeah, that one's a good one, though. It seems like that's nice to look at, and you know, you might use a bristle brush. I think I probably did, but I might have used something sort of coarse. But there's a dry white underneath, so I'm not worried about pulling the underneath layer up.
Really
If it was a panel, I would. So,
all right.
That's it.
Thank you so much. Now I will say,
helpful.
Thanks very much. We really appreciate it. And bye. Bye. And let's see.